So this lightning talk, we're going to go over the USD file format, the universal scene description, and we're going to walk through what it is, a little bit of a short history, and then also how to actually play around with it inside of Unreal Engine. So USD stands for Universal Scene Description, and as the name suggests, it is a scene description which contains various things. In this example here, you can see that within a world there's characters, there's an environment, there's lights, and it's a file format that sort of composes elements into a hierarchy that describes a scene. And the reason this came about is the need for it is when you're working on projects that have a lot of data sources or even have a variety of applications, you really need a ground truth for that data, especially when you're collaborating among different teams. And the thing is that even if you don't use a scene description format in the literal sense or explicitly, inevitably you'll have built some sort of pseudo scene description for a pipeline. There was, we've done this multiple times where we haven't necessarily used a specific scene description format like USD or GLTF for the web, but we've, worked with, it was a prior project where we had a Unreal application that was an authoring tool synced to a web application, which was also doing 3D viewport authoring with objects. And this was connected to a separate build pipeline and something on mobile. And naturally, even though we didn't use a scene description format specifically, we were using JSON and a couple of other things cobbled together to essentially define a sort of scene description that provided, again, a ground truth for the data that everything could reference and pass around. And so even if you're not doing using scene description, but you're using multiple applications, at some point you will reach this sort of inflection where it's an inevitable part of the process, and it's a natural transition that will follow when you're in that situation. So the short history of USD is it originated in the film industry, and for good reason, which we'll see. And the focus behind this was really just the goal of interoperability. And a lot of studios were already doing something similar, again, in this way. And this is not a new thing. It's been going on for a very long time, even prior to it being sort of formally referenced as a scene description. And USD as we have it today, it's attributed to Disney, but it's just that Disney open source theirs, and naturally the industry sort of adopted that as a standard. And I think they opened it up following their release of Brave, which was sort of the convergence point where they got quite a bit of the issues sort of ironed out, and then open sourced it after that point. Now, it's going to become clear why this format was developed and was sorely needed, especially in the movie industry. It's slowly making its way to the games industry, and again, as I was mentioning before, scene description as a concept certainly exists in a variety of ways, even if it's not explicitly sort of touted as that. But in here, I looked up the film. I just went and picked a film that was fairly recent with some visual effects stuff. Got Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. And that special effects team alone had over 18 studios credited, and those were just the studios. Those were excluding the other separate individuals that were brought in. And when you think about big budget films, it's never just a single team contributing to the process, and game studios certainly are increasingly becoming more like that now, where there are a multitude of studios with overlapping skill sets working in tandem. And in films, they're getting things done on an incredibly tight timeline that usually can't really, they usually don't have the luxury of being extended. And so when you look at those 18 studios, the question is, okay, well, what were all of them doing, right, on this single movie? And that's where things get interesting, because you can have, there are studios that will literally come in and just work on something as small as hair for a single character. But of course, there's other components to that character that have to be worked on and addressed. And you have various studios working even on the same character. So with Guardians of the Galaxy 2, the raccoon in the movie, they had different studios working on that same character, but in different parts of the movie. And again, when you go back to the timeline of movies and all the things that have to be done in tandem, this gets really sort of complicated. And if you imagine trying to do this as a bit of a thought exercise without some sort of standard format like USD, I mean, it just becomes nightmarish. And really, thanks to USD, that's sort of the reason why we're able to kind of, that's why really studios, movies can have so many studios working in tandem on these big budget films is because of the USD format. And not every studio uses the same software. That's a really big pain point. And that's specifically what USD gets around by providing this common shared language. So whether a studio is using Houdini, Blender, Maya, Cinema 4D, etc., they're able to split up the work, even on the same character, across different parts of a movie and maintain the quality and visual consistency within that budget and timeline. So USD gives us the concept of a stage, and that is what they call the scene description hierarchy, which contains data for geometry, lighting, animation. The actual intro to USD page has a handful of information on what USD does support here, and then what it can't do. I'm not going to get into it in this talk, but that page is there and it goes through it in pretty good detail. And yeah, we're going to jump in and actually take a look at this. So the first thing is enabling the plugin that's not enabled by default, and it is beta. It's been in beta for some time. You'll see two options. The first option is just support for importing the USD file, and the second one is multi-user sync. I haven't used or played around with this, only the first one, but that is there. So then for the USD stage window, once you've enabled the plugin, inside of Windows, it's going to be in virtual production, and you're going to see this USD stage option. And so when you click that, you get what's referenced as stage now. And there's not going to be anything here yet, of course, but what we're going to do is import a file that I have. And if we go back, no, sorry, where is it? Pixar has a couple of, so if you do Pixar kitchen scene USD, this is the one I'm using. They have a couple of standard USD files that they've created that you can import just for easy testing. You just have to accept the terms and download. That's what I have at the moment. And if I go ahead and grab, let's go ahead and take a look inside of here. So I've extracted this. Now inside the USD folder structure, if you would, you have the USD parent here, and then you have a folder with assets. And we'll get into why that is. But that's just a footnote to keep in mind as we're going through this. So to get the USD file into the Unreal, we're just going to go to File, Open. I'm going to go to Desktop. I'm going to just grab a new one, the other one I was messing around with. Select the USD file, click Open, and it's going to ask to create a new or use an existing cache. I'm going to create a new one for this, and yeah, we'll just leave it as that for now. Okay. And the reason for the cache is you can import many USD files, of course, and have a separate cache, which will load up all the references and such to that. Now, once it gets imported, a couple of things to note. You'll see here now on the left side with USD stage, we get the USD hierarchy, the scene hierarchy itself that's been composed here. And on the right side, if we sort of look over here, we'll see that we now have a USD stage actor that was added, which also has the hierarchy of objects and the geomaterials and such pasted here. So what I'm going to do is, to make this easy to see, I'm going to move this out from the world origin. Okay. Yep. So something that's really important to note is the way USD works is if we go look in our content browser, we see that we have this cache, but there is no content that's been added, even though we see all the assets here, and we see it in our USD stage window on the left side. The reason for this is that we're not actually pulling the assets into our content browser. If you remember the folder structure that I shared previously, here all the assets are contained inside of that folder structure, and what Unreal is doing is it is instead referencing the assets via the USD itself. And Unreal generates that stage actor, and what it does is it matches the imported scene description. And the reason it does that, this is an Unreal specific thing, is so that we're able to modify and play around with the geometry. So if I take a look at this fridge, we'll see here, and something I have enabled, which is just quite handy, is synchronize with the editor. So if I was to deselect that and I click around, it will choose the object inside of the world outliner, but naturally, you'll usually want this to be synced with the USD stage over here, so that way when you're selecting things, you're seeing the same object on this side. Now, if we go ahead and just pick this chair, for example, and if we move, oh, it's not doing that one. Let me try this one. Ceiling group, okay. So if we move, let's see, does it do it? Yeah, okay. So you'll see here that with the USD stage actor in Unreal, by essentially duplicating a reference to all the assets inside of the editor, what it's doing is giving us a representation that we can modify and play around with using the Unreal tools. And then this is translating to changes in the USD file itself. And you can see as I'm moving this around, I'm of course changing the transform here. So you can see it's negative 260, now it's negative 510, but over inside of the USD stage, you can see that the corresponding values are changing here. And then of course we can save these and go see those changes in something like Blender, which we'll do. We went over synchronize with the editor. We'll touch on variants first, and then we'll take a look at actually saving this out and opening Blender and checking that. So USD has this concept as well, which is nice, called variants. And again, the scene description format is really hyper optimized for collaborative use between, again, a lot of studios, a lot of individuals. And you not only have variants, you have layers, and artists can work on individual layers. And I think probably, I don't know for certain, but I imagine that the one file per actor system that came into Unreal was likely quite heavily influenced by the USD file format and a lot of the workflow optimizations that the movie industry had done to deal with large-scale studios working on the same thing. So with variants, this is quite neat, where inside of this example that they've given, we have a fridge. And the fridge has a variant. It can be decorated or it can be bare. You can sort of choose between those, and you can have as many alternatives as you want there. And we're going to use that to actually take a look at committing the edits upstream so that we can view things in another program, because the changes are saved on this, which means that any sort of modifications we make here, they'll be reflected in another program. So what I'm going to do is we'll go ahead and open the scene in Blender just so that we can confirm that we're seeing the same thing between the two programs. We'll delete that. Go ahead and open. Don't say, okay, desktop. Oops. Sorry. Meant to do imports. Great. So I'm going to import this. All right. Okay. Boop, boop, boop. All right. So we're going to see the refrigerator is currently decorated. It's got all of its stuff on it, which is cool. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this. I'm going to change it to bare. And then, if I just save in the editor, it's not going to do anything. It's going to save the state inside of Unreal itself in relation to the data cache that was created. But in order to propagate these changes into the USD source file, you go to File, you go to Save, it'll do its thing. And then if we go back to Blender, and we'll re-import that. Delete. All right, delete. Oops. Delete. Sure. Okay. File, import. Let's take a look. Kitchen sets. We'll jump in, grab the kitchen set, import. Okay. We'll see now that the fridge is bare. So there are, of course, pipelines for this to be streamlined. Just in the way that I have it set here locally, I need to close and reopen in order to get those changes because nothing's actually sort of doing a live reload. But there's plenty of tools that companies use to handle live reloading when changes are made and pushed via the USD. So then, of course, if I was to change this back to bare, from bare to decorated, save it, then the changes would be seen again. Small scale example, but again, thinking about the use case of the Aquaman movie, 18 studios, multiple people in each studio using different software tools, it becomes really evident why this format is so important and how it creates that much efficiency in that pipeline. I mean, we've naturally been trying to move things more to Unreal Engine itself and try and get away from working in so many applications because that was a problem we were having where we would create something in one application, get it into another application, and naturally we fight quite a bit with trying to standardize those formats and translate the data between different programs. USD comes in to really address and solve that. Okay. And the last thing here is, even though the assets are referenced when you pull in the USD scene, you can, if you want, actually import the assets as actual U assets. And to do that, you would just go to Actions, Import, and you can see the tooltip there says it. This imports the entire stage as actual Unreal assets, and I'll create a new folder here, and we'll just say USD kitchen assets. Okay. You'll get your import options, which will be here in what you'd want to import, and you can select from the hierarchy. We're just going to import everything. Okay. I'm gonna ignore the layers there. Okay, so now if we go to our content browser, we'll see USD Kitchen Assets, and then going in here, you'll see that now we have all the static meshes and the materials that were part of this scene, and now they're actual U assets that we can modify, play around with, change, and do whatever we'd like there. So the last note is not specific to USD, but I just wanted to make a comment that the GLTF file format comes up a fair amount, and it's really sort of a lightweight version of USD for the real-time web, and that's recently what we've been doing more work in. On the right side here, I got Quinn, the character from Unreal, imported into an application along with its animations, and all of that came in via GLTF, which had a scene description for the character, its materials, its animations that I was then able to use and pull into the application. Yeah, cool. That's it. Questions?
Great. Yes. So the USD file format, is that something you do in Blender when you export?
Yeah, so it's an open source universal standard. So you can do it really in any program. It is, again, for a lot of game industry software, most implementations are either in beta or just coming out of beta. So I would say it's generally a newer thing, and it really only came in, I think, near the end of Unreal 4. But in any application, there will be an option to import, and there should be a USD file format to import the entire stage. And again, when you do that, really what the application is doing is it's looking in that folder, it's getting all the assets, it's creating the references, and then as you update things in this application and save it, it will update the source assets. And typically, as you saw in Unreal, there's a layer between that, so we can mod around and play with things, and do what we want, change the material, transforms, etc., and save it here. But that will just save it locally inside of the cache we've created. When you want to actually propagate those changes to the USD file format, every application that I could find so far has a separate interface to deal with actual committing changes to the USD source assets itself. Which is kind of nice, because then you get to work locally with whatever it is that you want to do, and then sort of cherry pick which things you want to commit.
So is this something that, like, within the Notion Theory Studio, how can we utilize USD, or is this more of a, here's something that we're going to encounter in our work with other companies, or anytime we're doing collaborations, so we should be familiar with what the USD format is, or is this something that we can actually use internally for something? So, for example, when Gratchen's putting together the level art, should his export be actually USD when it comes into Unreal, or not? Is there some drawback there? Because I imagine, you go.
There is, and it's a really good question, and that was sort of what led me to pick this, was because I had that question myself. Is okay, well, it seems great, so is there a way for us to use it? And there's a positive and there's a negative. So the positive is in sort of, as you were getting to, when you have multiple people working in different applications, yes, it's great, because now everyone can kind of roll their own flavor of whatever it is that they want, in regards to the environment, geometry, character animations, etc. And it will just work because they're all communicating in the same language. But where I think it does not fit with what we are trying to do is we are trying to move more of our functions into Unreal Engine itself, for the reason that we do want some cross-pollination between, like, for example, Sammy being able to maybe play with some of the control rig stuff that Kirill made so he can deal with the sequencer. The curse of USD is that you have to work with that file format, which means now you don't really have everything configured in a single program like we do now. And so, someone might make the animations in Maya and the level in Blender, and to actually modify those assets, you would need to be familiar with that program to deal with it. Each program does interpret the results so that you can work with them, but the reason I think it's partially a net negative for us is I think we get back to a little bit of fragmentation between the tooling that we're using. And if things are on a very tight timeline and people just need to use the tools that they're comfortable with in order to accomplish some objective, then I think, yes, the format's great because it streamlines that process without people having to worry too much there. But yeah, the other thing is, in relation to what we're doing, it does move the source of truth in regards to all the data outside of the platform, right? It's sort of this central container so that all these other programs disparately can plug into it. And again, with us specifically in our studio, we're trying to move more into Unreal Engine and treat that as sort of like the tool of truth as well as the source of truth for most of what we're doing.
Yep. Okay. Cool.
So I think if you were to ask me maybe 6 months ago, prior to us sort of saying, hey, we're going to commit to try to do as much in Unreal Engine as possible, then I would say yeah. Because, we had Kirill working in Houdini, doing some animations in Maya, Gratchen in Blender. Like, it was like in different places, right? And one of the common things that came up was, okay, great, we have stuff in Unreal Engine, but it is difficult to edit or, play with. Or if I do need to edit, then I have to go learn another tool. And so those problems still sort of persist a bit with USD. Again, it is streamlined a little bit more in trying to translate stuff with that sort of common language, but yeah.
Okay, cool.
Can we build
I
with
didn't know
USD
if-
format? Sorry. Can we use it like...
No, speak. Go on.
Yeah, that was my question. Can we actually... I mean, I know it's not really... We don't have all separate parts of the scene, but could we
it's a good question.
use it? I mean, just curious. Maybe it's too large, or is there drawback? Or it shouldn't be used like that, since it's a game engine, I don't know. Or it's just for rendering in
Do you mean
in an engine.
us creating our own USD out of Unreal Engine?
No.
So I think what
No,
you're saying
if
is
we-
that rather than building everything inside Unreal using, for example, the regular scene outliner, we would build all the assets inside a USD file.
Mm-hmm.
So each level, for example, could be a USD file, or at
Good.
least the static assets.
Yeah.
Yeah, do we get colliders of it? Do we get that geometry, or what do we? Or it's all that lost, as I understood. I don't really understand.
So that information, I think, is kept, but I think the problem that we specifically here in our use case that we would eventually run into, and from what I gather, this is sort of the gray-ish area at the moment, is since Unreal is pushing quite heavily, it has been for some time, into cinematics and virtual production. That certainly initiated like getting support in for the USD format, but in the case of things like films, you don't have to deal with a lot of the plumbing and wiring that you would have with gameplay logic. And I think that's kind of a gray area at the moment where I don't know for certain because I haven't tried that aspect yet, but intuition tells me that a fair amount of information would be lost trying to use USD with with a game that has a lot of gameplay logic or things wired into the assets, I suppose. Because, for example, when we're creating, like if you think about, I don't know, let's say we have a campfire, and you can interact with the campfire, and based on certain properties, the campfire may turn on or not, or it needs wood in order to be able to be lit. Like, if you start getting into these sorts of conditionals, to my understanding, USD doesn't really deal with that. It's a scene description in that it will describe the scene insofar as sort of the visuals of what you can do with it. And if we go to Introduction to USD, yeah, it represents primarily 3D data, so geometry, shading, model, and asset, not the logic itself. And I have a feeling that we would run into issues where references and anything gameplay logic related would be broken. But in just creating a scene and static meshes and materials and some base animations for things, it would probably be okay. But then again, it's like, is it worth it doing that if you sort of have to split that difference between the USD file format and then all the gameplay logic and such in the engine? It's a good question.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I already tried the file without knowing it was like that super new standard, and it works just fine. and especially Apple added support in the Mac OS Finder, and you have a USD file with animation, for example, and you just hit spacebar and it loads in 1 second.
Yeah.
Um,
You first.
I was going to ask. I have a memory of the last time that we discussed USD. There was some interesting, unique features about it that were like that elevated it far above and beyond anything, any of the other formats. It was to do with that
Was with
the
the layers.
metaverse,
Yeah.
the layers, yeah, and that seemed like something that was like a really unique thing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, just for backstory with everyone, on a prior project that we were scoping, one of the questions came up that we needed to procedurally generate this world, and then with that world, we needed to show it in sort of different states, if you would. And when Tim and I were having a discussion there, we were sort of positing out loud, oh, well, what if we sort of turn this on and turn this off? And really what we were referencing at is, what if we could break the scene down into layers and sort of, hit a switch? And it turned out that that is in large part what USD supports out of the box. And inside of the USD stage window, you'll see down here that you have this concept of layers. Now, it seems that, again, what I've found interesting, and I haven't confirmed any of this yet, but I've seen sort of bits of inspiration where, just as you sort of have the one file per actor system that Unreal's moved to, just to make collaboration easier without as much conflict, which again USD sort of had built in. Layers reminds me of the idea of data layers in Unreal, where you can take large swaths of data, whatever that may be. So, of course, in USD, you can take a character and its animations and lighting and a certain environment and a set of props and put that into a layer and be able to, show or hide those layers, which is akin to what we would do similarly with data layers inside of Unreal Engine. So, thinking out loud, going to an earlier discussion point we were chatting on, I don't know that Unreal is going to try and fit USD into the gameplay side of things as a standard file format, so much as taking the good parts about USD and trying to extract those out and embed those as features or sort of default configurations in the game engine, so that we get the benefits of USD without having to try and, take a file format which was originally built for movie studios and large-scale collaboration and try and force gameplay logic and other things into it. It feels like they're siphoning things out into separate features that can be utilized.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. It's an interesting technology, and I think that we should keep an eye on it. And what could be cool is maybe there's some points within the studio where we could use it. Perhaps is for the projects that are outside of Unreal, so the web projects, etc. That could be the first deployment point. Because you need a format. And the web stuff supports reading USD, right?
Yep.
3JS. So
yeah, and I think this is one of those interesting areas, because in prior cases where we did projects that were multi-platform, it was often the case where, yes, because we would use one set of tech for the web, one set of tech for mobile, another one maybe for desktop, depending. In these cases, you did have to, recreate the environments for those different platforms. And naturally, as you're getting at with USD, it's okay, well, just use this and everything can sort of be out of the box between each of those. And we had sort of talked about, what's interesting is when Alex was showing Spline the other day, it's a bit of a similar concept, or like creating a single tool, but be able to use everywhere. And like naturally, I mean, most tools support the standard file formats, like you think FBX, OBJ, etc. So it's not like, again, that hasn't been available. It's the broader concept of the scene itself, being able to compose literally an entire world and just pass that around in a file is, again, quite new, at least at the game side with this.
Okay.
Any other
And with
questions?
FPS or OBJ, I had sometimes problem, but if the USD is like well made in its use now and started by Disney, all that, it probably works better.
Yeah. Again, I think part of it is that, and I'm positing here because I'm not a 3D modeler. I haven't done as much on that side, but you know, with FBX, OBJ, like these are formats that describe models and properties of models, like the individual assets versus the scene description. And I think that probably one of the areas where there's likely some friction with USD, like not purposely, is just that it does require a change in workflow, because now you sort of have to get everyone on board to say, all right, we're all going to agree to use this format and agree to work with the constraints of this format so we can all speak the same language. And I imagine for a handful of studios, certainly small ones, that there's probably a bit too much friction in trying to adopt that versus just sort of the standard way of, okay, make stuff, exports in FBX, drop it into Unreal. Great, I have it. I'll do things with it, and then continue on that way.
Do you need to go to your meeting?
Oh, I actually got pushed back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you for the time.
So next question is, I'm interested in how it represents stuff that is not 3D geometry. So materials. I read that it can do things like it's like not just visual materials. It can handle like physical materials as well. And like what is that? I saw some mention of it using like Omniverse. I think like somehow like embeds MDL materials in there. And I'm not sure what the capabilities are there. And I'm not sure. Is there something equivalent to USD, but for like shader graphs? Like, I don't think there is. So I wonder whether it just generates like a name, some properties, and then it's up to the program to figure out what to do with that. Or
So just open it up in.
That's very small for my old man eyes.
Okay, let's.
That's better.
Yeah. So, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it being a.
Hey, look at that! Look at that! So it's embedding the types as well.
Yes.
Yeah, that's neat.
Which again is similar to what we were doing on that older project. Azamat will remember that like this is in essence what we were doing. We basically created our own scene description because we needed to sort of synchronize data between a bunch of different systems.
So it also allows you to do. It looks like you can reference other things that are inside.
Yes.
Like external or within the same file, so you can do instancing, for example.
Yep, exactly.
Can you do
looks like an HTML?
No, it's a lot more like JSON, yeah.
For sure.
Well, sort of. It's like JSON at the high level. Yeah. Ish, yeah. It's weird.
It's its own thing.
Yeah. Can you? There we go. Modeling variant, shading variant, clean. Yeah. So, can you do a search for like something to do with materials? Like, type in albedo or something. No. Specular. So it probably it must have, like, it doesn't embed anything like a PBR parameters or anything like that. It looks like it's just got.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's colors in that one. Where do those colors come from?
Because if we check the actual fridge and the static mesh, I mean, it's got.
I have a file that has materials and animations. It's an example from Sketchfab or something like that.
But are
I
they?
just dropped it in the chat.
Is that? Are those colors part of a texture, and it's just applying a texture, or are they somehow vertex colors? What is this?
Yeah, I have no idea. Because there's only 2 slots, and this is definitely not.
What's that material? Go to the parent of it. Just let's have a quick look at it. What's that? Zoom in. Vertex. Yeah, so it's vertex color. Okay, interesting. Cool.
Yeah.
And it embeds the transform order as well.
Yeah.
So, like, as in, do you rotate it before you translate it, or do you translate it before you rotate it? Yeah, that's so cool. Because obviously, different programs by default would have different transform orders, so they need to say it explicitly,
Yes.
so that they can, translate between programs. That makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone actually does this. When we were doing our own scene description previously, part of the reason of doing it in a similar form, I mean, we just did JSON. This is a unique thing, but it was so that you could do some composing and editing directly in a notepad. And then, of course, when it gets reconstructed, like, it has those changes in it as well.
Now, is USD specifically a text format, or is there a binary format for, like, compression and all that?
Yep. So they have a couple of different ones. So USD is the text format. So they have USD A, which is the sorry, they have 4. Let me see if it'll show me. Why is that?
Oh, my poor eyes, man.
Oh, yeah. Okay. No, I know it's going to be difficult. USD is the text formats, which is, of course, why we open it in the notepad. I'm trying to remember. There's USD-Z, which is zipped, and then USD-A is the binary format, and USD-C is, I cannot remember.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
And then, actually, in looking at this as well, there was a separate kitchen set instance.
Okay.
That came with it, although I don't know the source of that.
Now, is there anything related to, like, streaming or, like, so again, back onto that Omniverse use case, I believe that they had something which, it would be it was allowing multi-user editing and streaming of data coming in and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how does the format enable that? And also, while we're at it, it's not USD anymore, right? It's OpenUSD, right?
Maybe.
Yeah, I think that's what it's called now. They've, like, since it came out of the Pixar, well, the Disney world. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. So with Omniverse, my understanding there is they've built the infrastructure to enable streaming for collaboration with the USD file format. So it's got the scene description, but they've created the means to make sure that if 2 people working on the same file, that things will get overwritten, or there's a check to say, hey, you're about to overwrite this. So it's just it's just a change. Do you want to do that? But yeah, there's nothing I know of that is inherently baked into the USD format itself, other than just being that common language that you can then sort of build around.
Okay.
Now, but
Okay.
I think that's sort of why Omniverse is sort of heavily supported, because Omniverse itself is really sort of an aggregator of programs in
Sure.
essence, where it's this hub and spoke thing where it's the hub and it has a lot of connections from external programs that can, you know, write into it, which is why we were previously looking at, or essentially having to adopt the USD file format there.
Okay.
Although I don't know if they promote it or suggest it by default. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everyone. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Cool. We'll
Good
close it
talk.
out.
Yeah.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Nice. Cool.